Hi, this is going to be a short mini lecture or mini tutorial on Chapter 1 of Understanding Business Ethics. So, ethics is really just this idea of understanding the values that an individual uses to determine what is right or wrong, or what is acceptable or inappropriate behavior. So we can kind of ask ourselves some questions to see um, if we think something is ethical. So we can ask ourselves, is the behavior or the action consistent with the overall basic duties of the individual? Does the behavior or action acknowledge and respect the rights of people? Would this behavior or action be considered a best practice in this certain situation? And does this behavior or action match the overall beliefs or morals of an individual? So I think it's important for us to note that when we talk about ethics and morals and so forth, that everybody's ethics are different, and there's so many things that contribute to why everybody's ethical standards are different. And that's why this is such a big issue. So if we take this concept of ethics and we go one step further, we have this concept of business ethics. And so these are the collective or the whole values of an organization or a business that are used to evaluate whether a behavior of the whole group or the members of the organization are considered to be acceptable or appropriate. So is what we're doing as a business ethical or right or wrong or moral? So there's three roles of morals, all right? So we have an individual's principles, an individual's character, and then consequences. So why is studying business ethics important? I think that we've all heard or maybe even personally experienced situations in the workplace where somebody or multiple people were doing things that we consider to not be okay. So a 2012 study by Ernst & Young found that surveyed 1,700 executives from 43 different countries. 15% of those people stated that they would take cash payments in the form of a bribe. 39% reported that bribery and corruption were common in their countries, which it is very acceptable in some countries. And 24% stated that bribery and corruption have increased. So it's important that A, we understand the global environment that we live in, and B, to understand ethical standards of people around the world, but also to try to understand how we as people working in the business world or working individuals in general, what we can do to be ethical in terms of our business doing. So I'm not going to get into a lot of the theory that's in your textbook. You can read it if it interests you, but I did think this was pretty good. So your textbook author talks about the foundation of ethical theory, and they talk about three different ways to look at ethics. So descriptive ethics, analytical ethics, and normative ethics. So descriptive ethics is just defined as the presentation of facts that are related to a specific ethical action that's in question. So we use descriptive ethics when we want to understand what maybe happened to cause there to be this ethical question in place. Analytical ethics is described as understanding the reasons a course of action that may have an ethical impact took place, so kind of understanding the why. So we move from the how and when, and we look at why did this happen. And then in normative ethics, we're looking at how do we ensure that we have ethical behavior in the future. And so we move away now from the how and when and why, and we start to look at the future. And we're looking at what should we do in the future so that we don't have ethical concerns or don't have unethical behavior in the future. So there's some guiding principles that can be used to help to ensure that we're making ethical decisions. So fidelity, an individual's needs to keep explicit and implicit promises. All right, so keeping promises. if they're ethical promises, right? Reparation, so we have to act on repairing the consequences for previous wrongful acts. So how do we move if something negative happened in the future, and I'm sure you can all think of many instances, how do we make that right? Gratitude, how do we show gratitude and kindness for what we have been given? Justice, making sure that we should try to see that goods are fairly distributed. Beneficence, beneficence, an individual should focus on trying to improve the lives of others. So trying to benefit or trying to help others so their lives are better. Self-improvement, trying to improve ourselves by focusing on virtue and intelligence. So just really helping ourselves to be a better person, and non-injury, not doing harm onto others, not knowingly doing harm onto others. And we'll see some cases where these guiding principles were not followed. So the Codex has identified 8 major underlying principles in which ethical behavior can be interpreted and evaluated. So these are some principles that can help us determine if something was unethical behavior. So fiduciary principles. So a company has a legal fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of its stakeholders. And I'm going to stop here and just kind of explain stakeholders versus shareholders. So a shareholder, because you'll hear them used interchangeably. A shareholder is somebody who owns stock in a company. Um, and so there's some theories that say a company has to make decisions in the best interest of its shareholders, i.e. make money. But I think a more popular one in today's age is the stakeholder model, which basically says that a stakeholder in a company is anybody who's impacted by it. So it's its employees, it's its shareholders, it's its customers, it's the environment, it's so much more. And so the fiduciary principle says that we have to act in the best interest of the stakeholders and then other employees. So making sure there's no conflicts of interest, doing our due diligence, making sure that we promote the interests of the company in a professional and ethical manner. Right? Property principles. This is based on the belief that every employee should respect property as well as the rights of the owners of the property. So think about employee theft. That's a huge ethical thing that happens all the time, right? Misappropriation of funds, so not managing funds wisely, wasting resources, wasting paper, right? So really making sure that we're respecting, and we can use the term property here loosely, but we're respecting the company property. So reliability is based on the belief that it is the employee's responsibility to honor their commitments. All right. So traditional violations might include a breach of contract or not fulfilling a promised action. In the business world, we have some actual legal pieces in place. For example, let's say that you go to work for a company and they say, all right, great, but if you leave our company, you can't work for one of our competitors for 6 months. And this is common, and it's called a non-compete clause. You can actually work with a lawyer to make that a legal thing so that you can't compete with your former employer. Right. Transparency is just the belief that every employee should conduct business in a truthful and open manner. All right. I think we hear about this concept of transparency all the time, not being fraudulent, not being deceptive, being open and honest. I think these are things that we like in our everyday lives and our personal lives as well. Dignity, this is based on the belief that employees need to respect all the other individuals, right? So we don't want to humiliate, harass people. We don't want to try to coerce them in a negative way. Just really kind of doing unto others as we would want done unto ourselves. Fairness is based on the belief that stakeholders who have a vested interest in the firm should be treated fairly. So again, understanding that, that stakeholders are the employees and the customers and our earth and our resources and just a variety of other things. The Citizenship Principle is based on the belief that every employee should act as a responsible citizen in the community, and it's expected that employees respect the laws of their community. You'll see that a lot of companies are now actually having their employees go out into the community and do community service. My neighbor, actually, part of her job is that she goes and volunteers at our local food shelf, and she actually gets paid for that, so that she is, her and her company are being responsible citizens in the community. Responsiveness principle is based on the belief that employees have a responsibility to respond to the requests for information about operations. So, needing to be responsive to ideas presented by stakeholders, needing to be able to provide information when it's needed. So, really, this kind of ties into just communicating. And that is just kind of a brief overview of the pieces that I wanted you to know for chapter 1. Thanks.